Hello. Can we hear me? All right. Can we, you should be able to see me fine because even I can tell that, but can you hear me okay? Is this going good? Good. If you could actually help me out. Hello. We're here to talk about Volume 6 of Erha, but very quickly, because I just found out that the prime placement for this new microphone is different than what I thought it was. And I just found this out about 3 minutes ago. So very quickly, when it comes to P's and plosives and breathiness, how is that coming through on here? If the P's or B's type of sounds really kind of come through in a more explosive way, hence, plosive, then I need to move it. But if not, then it's fine. Oh, good. See, it already sounds much better. Thank you so much. Me and audio situations, we simply don't get along. So it takes me a second. And at least now that this beautiful mic has been given to me by Heather, at least now I know that if there's a problem, it's a me problem and not a mic problem. And that, oddly enough, goes a long way in helping me figure things out. So thank you. Thank you so much. Let's see. Gee, what happened previously on Erha? We could always talk about the Straits first, because Yawanshi and oh my god, why am I blanking on the other name? Nengongsa. Yawanshi and Nengongsa simply need to happen. But I feel like it's either going to be incredibly hard won, because it kind of already is, or it's going to follow a similar thread as Chuaning and Morun seem to be following, which is to say, I think that Chuaning and Morun are going to finally have sex before any of the really terrible shit, whatever it is, starts to go down. I think we're going to get past that threshold first. It just feels that way. And on one hand, I could understand why you would want to get Yuangshi and Nengongsa kind of echoing that a little bit. But then on the other hand, it's usually supporting romance arcs usually operate in a nice, lovely counterpoint to whatever's going on with the main couple to vary it up. Give us a little bit of different expectations, and it really to keep us engaged, even if the main couple is in a bit of a plateau for narrative reasons, then we have stuff going on over here. So I'll be curious to see which one it is, but I feel like they're gonna have to go through some shit before they actually get together. Go through even more shit before we actually get progress. Hell, actually, you know what? They even have the vibes of a couple that won't get together until the last volume, to towards the end. Finally, there'll be a page and a half detailing how these people finally came around to being together. I wouldn't put that past them, now that I'm saying things out loud. I would love for it to happen sooner, because there's already so much pining and unfair circumstances that have kept them at a distance. And speaking, and when I say unfair circumstances, Yuangshi is so, her situation is so fucked up. I don't know if I accurately conveyed my sheer and utter disgust at basically being raised to be somebody else. That is the type of Danmei, East Asian fucked upness that you just don't usually see in the West. And that's a compliment. Like, I love it. That's awful. You know what I mean? That is such a unique and solid, fucked up situation. But it's also awful. Simply fucking awful. I would like for Yewangshi to have something nice. And by that I mean Nengongsa. If we could just pull that off, please. Do a solid for the straights. Which is a wild thing to say. Oh, and then also, thank you, Liv. Can Chuaning please take Nengongsa as a disciple? Oh my god. In a simple paragraph, all of a sudden, I never wanted anything more. Aside from maybe, you know, Nengongsa and Yewangshi getting together. I mean, you can't. She just drops that in. Just ever so little, like, sweetly. Just, by the way, this pining is going on for Nengongsa. This type of pining. It simply has to happen, right? In some way, even if it's not an official capacity, it's got to go down somehow. I just want some kind of something, because that's painful. I'm in pain because of that. And she did that in legitimately like a couple of paragraphs. That was freakish. Henry, not Brittany going, what about straight pride? Listen, before I discovered my sexuality and then discovered queer ships and queer media, I was into the straights, all right? And I still am. I have plenty of straight ships. I can get down with a straight ship just as easily, you know? My first 5 ships were all straight and all very telling of certain psychological aspects of myself. But I mean, when I see a good ship, it's a good ship. And sometimes that means trying to get something to happen for the straights. Trying to pull for the heteros for a second, you know? Valid heteros. Lethal. Lethal. Henry, but a man and a woman? How unusual. Very progressive. It's very forward thinking, I realize. It's not at all the norm. Oh yeah, love bunnies. If an author can make me like a straight ship in a danmei, that author is great. I would agree. I would agree with this. Honestly, I really would. It's the whole dynamic of you're coming to this story for one specific thing and one specific type of thing. And so if an author is just so good at romance to the point that even stuff that's off the reservation of just this specific thing, you can be like me and totally like straight ships, but you're coming to danmei for the good gay shit. And if they just so happen to be like, by the way, we also have some good straight shit going on, like on the side. That is indeed a sign of very, very good writing. Liv, too woke for me. I know, right? I am indeed too woke. I'm doing the straight shit. What am I thinking? Love Bunny, it says, I can't go back to straight stuff after entering the BL world. It's just not it, even though I'm straight as fuck. You know, it does kind of lift the bar, I must say. My relationship with straight ships and straight romance has 1000% shifted compared to the bar, so to speak, after getting into queer media. It's just like, it's almost like a shift in kind of what I look for and what really interests me. And also the fact that queer ships have some specific stuff like built in most of the time that naturally hits harder than stuff that goes on in straight ships. Like, the biggest and most basic example is that if you're going to have a forbidden, you know, romance in straight world, you have to like come up with a reason. And it's not the most difficult thing in the world, but you kind of have to come up with a reason. Whereas, unfortunately, in the real world, but in terms of like fantasy land, is right there in queer ships. Like, the relationship existing itself is it's just baked right in. And as someone who has always been a fan of forbidden romance, or it really actually all falls under the header of forbidden romance. As someone who's always been into that, even over in hetero land. Yeah. And of course, queer media goes about it in an entirely different way than a lot of straight media does. We can't even start to talk about like straight romance, capital R romance, because that's like a whole thing. That's an entire conversation unto itself. Live, I ride for Shui Jingyang, the only straight man ever. See? And then when you find valid heteros, they are that much more special. And not that all, you know, queer relationships don't have to be valid. All hetero relationships don't have to be valid either. We can get down with the toxic straight relationships, but it's usually has to be like a very specific type of toxicity that doesn't trigger real world annoyances and grievances too much. At least for me, a lot of the time. Again, it's a whole other conversation. So how does one bring up the baths? Like, where do we start? Do we start where chat seems to be starting? With the barking? I think that's where we start, apparently. So it was rather enlightening to come across a new way in which I have shame. I could not read that part aloud. And like in general, I avoid like the more onomatopoeia stuff just because it feels silly in a rather like odd self-conscious way, even though it's perfectly natural on the page. For some reason, me saying that, like, I just have a thing about it, so I typically avoid it whenever possible, as you may or may not have noticed. I don't know. So then on one hand, it's not surprising that I wouldn't be able to say it, but like, it took me by surprise. One, that it was happening, but then of course it automatically made sense. And then two, that I couldn't bring myself to do it. Because I have read smut to you guys. I have read explicit material to you. You would think that I would no longer have any shame whatsoever. And yet, here we are. It was, however, perfect. Of course it was. Between that and Baby Girl, I don't know how we're standing. Henry's like, to be fair, it's hard to look into the camera and, you know, bark, which even in a non-sexual context, I feel like that would be difficult in most situations. And then also, staying on the smut, though, how dare she get me on board once again with intercrural. For a second time now, I've been down for intercrural. Who could have guessed, not me, that was a possibility in my brain, so long as it made actual sense in a couple of different ways as to why they would be doing this before full penetration. I guess that's just what I needed, which, you know, in hindsight, it makes a lot of sense, because I guess one of the things that never really drew me to that was the fact that I'm like, or you could just put it in the actual hole. You know what I mean? That was part of my thought process somehow. And she just solved it. That's not the entire reason why I've never really been drawn to it, but that was certainly a factor, and she just fixed it. And it is admittedly silly on my end, because obviously plenty of sexual activity doesn't involve penetration, and obviously people still do it because it's great and fun and they like it. Like, it doesn't all have to be, but that's just where my brain went. Yeah, Shizun's Lost Peach, which, by the way, excellent name. Yeah, says, yeah, but Morun is like massive. That would be the other reason, not just the character reasons for why Chuanin can't just go from 0 to 60, but also because apparently he would be going from 0 to 60 inches, and that you need to have, there are steps in between there. You can't just do that, you know? But I mean, the whole bath setup, being semi-public, being in water, us getting art of that, the whole thing was beautiful. Drove me insane because, yet again, I mean, that's why the title of this stream is called Edging the Audience, because yet again, they're doing things, but not the thing that I personally am the most excited to see them do, for, again, a variety of reasons. And so once again, we've been brought closer to the point of but without it happening. And every time something like this happens now, it just makes me more curious about the moment of truth. Oh yeah, couscous. Sex doesn't have to make sense, and even without Morun size, anal penetration usually requires more prep than typical BL allows. It's gotten a little bit more mindful in recent years, but I totally remember the era of no preparation, we die like men, but not in a deliberate way, in a this is just how it goes kind of way, and that was not, no. Nowadays there's at least something. Yeah, Zareem, we die like men who like men and have sex with men. Shizun's Lost Peach, I did indeed. The second I said mindful, I was like, do I also say demure? Do I make a joke about demure? Or do I withhold? I barely withheld. Thank you for saying it for me. Henry, you can't be saying things like this. We die like Shizun's. Hold on a second. No, that was impeccable, Henry, actually. That was rather incredible. Yes, Ninan. Also, the comedy of the other disciples gossiping about fox spirits. Actual perfection. This is how you have your semi-public cake and eat it too, is that you get to have this kind of fun, but then you also have a little bit of consequences. Just a little bit. Not so much that somebody barges in and we don't get to see it happen, but enough to where you're like, yeah, that was a little risky for the following reasons. Also, Liv, yeah, now we know that Chuaning is a screamer. And also, like, could you blame him, though? Even when it's inner curl, you're feeling that just between your thighs? You're losing your mind. I'm trying to decide in this moment how much I share about myself. One moment, please. You know, fuck it. So many years ago, when I was in my early 20s, I had a bit of a situationship when I was like 21, 22. I had a situationship with a 19-year-old male gymnast. And therefore, as someone who has experience with a man of size, I can verify. This is all academic verification of Chuaning's response to physical stimuli. It's a very by the book. I'm peer reviewing and scientifically vouching for that experience, in case you needed that spelled out for your research, of course. So, was there something else about the gossip that was, I mean, the whole thing was really funny. And just it's always great to see the Stoic one flustered. I mean, that's half the reason why you make Stoic characters to begin with. Because the only reason you make a character is so that you prod all of, his traits in ways that they don't necessarily want them prodded. And so you make a Stoic character because you're going to poke at the Stoicism, right? You're going to get underneath it, and you're also going to put him in situations with a capital S that call for the Stoicism to be directly challenged. Otherwise, why make him Stoic? Way too much fun to see him grapple with that in that way. The whole thing was so fantastic. And way too much fun. And now, well, no. Because since now they're going to be... it feels like they're now going to make an effort to be more in private. So we're not really running the risk. However, if Chuaning is as loud as he could be in the moment of truth, they might want to take a vacation out to the countryside. They may want some space. Logistically speaking, is the Red Lotus Pavilion far enough away? Is the question. I feel like it would be, in which case problem solved. But if somebody who knows the geography of the area better than I do. It should be. Zareem says it should be. Love bunnies, thank you. They can set up sound barriers. I forget about that. I forget about that all the freaking time. Never mind. Actually, personal wish list for things that can happen for them. I would love a very specific situation in where they get up to hijinks in fairly close proximity, like in a hotel or something like that. and they drop a silent spell, but people are like right there, like right on the other side of the wall. I would love that. That's just it. Meat Bun, if you're listening and you haven't finished this series however long ago, that's my, I'm just putting that in there. That's just my request. Also, yeah, the brazenness, Love Bunnies, of next time you can come on my cock. That just gonna sit here and bask in it, actually. What do you say to that? Besides yes, if you're chewing. There is an element of exploring Chuaning's horniness over a long period of time that we don't get, for completely valid reasons, that we don't get in something like Untamed. At least not to this extent, not to this length, right? We get, if I remember correctly, we get moments of that, absolutely, but not this prolonged breaking down of physical barriers. We get the prolonged breaking down of mental and emotional and idealistic barriers with Lan Wangji, but this is a much more like explicit exploration, and we need both, obviously. And to be very, like, to be honest, I don't know, I wouldn't be able to tell you which I prefer, which seems kind of wild because I'm an explicit fan. The 99% of the time when I read fan fiction, it is explicit. That is because you just don't get that anywhere else. Everywhere else is censored. Even the stuff that's like rated R in the West still tends to be fairly somewhat censored. It has gotten more explicit over time, obviously, but scratch the itch, you know what I'm saying? And fan fiction is one of the only places where you can fully do that and get all of the story and character to back it up. So you would think that I would be like, this Chuaning's way of exploring things is 100% my preference, but well, no. it's the conflict of, you would think that explicitness would be my absolute preference, but then on the other hand, me liking both is very me, right down to my core. I like both all the time. In almost every situation, I prefer both. If not just everything, everywhere, all at once. Ninin, both. Both is good. Excellent reference, Ninin. From an excellent movie. And Liv says, I like that it suits his character. And it really does. It suits his character as I hit the mic. It suits his character. It suits the situation. It suits the story. And it suits their relationship. It's absolutely the perfect choice rather than just sticking to the emotional barriers being broken down. Just like how all of the decisions made for Lan Wangji in Modazushi was 100% correct. They're just two entirely different situations and two entirely different ways to explore a stoic character in a romantic context. And I love them both. Deeply. Very deeply. Live, yeah, and it also suits what they've been through. Their very specific history and the darkness and trauma and awfulness around that makes it very, very clear why the physical explicit nature is so necessary. You could not, it is the polar opposite from gratuitous. Shizun's Lost Peach says Chu Wan-ning is giving demisexuality and I'm here for it. We love a stoic character that gives demisexual. Spock, Lan Wangji, the wife. Like, we love the wife, admittedly, less stoic. However, that's a whole other conversation. She qualifies. She would be the Spock and the Lan Wangji and the Chu Wan-ning in these. That would be the archetype that she fulfills 1000%. Whereas I'm the disaster bisexual. We go together quite well, actually. It's been very validating, starting with Kirk and Spock and then finding these other ships throughout the years where we're like, oh, we're kind of the dynamic. You know what I mean? Love Bunny says, ever notice how Chu Wan-ning worried about how it's going to fit rather than anything else? Like being the top would never even cross his mind. Wasn't there like the briefest of moments where it was somewhat floated as a possibility, but not even necessarily by Chu Wan-ning? I might be making this up, actually. I might just be fully wrong about this. Right, no, yeah, Blue Turnip says no. And Tuxedo Cat, Chu Wan-ning is the bottomiest bottom to ever bottom. Yes, indeed, very much. He just is. And I do quite like how Erha manages to deliver on some key tropes without reducing either of the characters to a checklist of the most obvious things. Because I feel like if there was a more obvious version of this story, then like Chu Wan-ning would be the disciple and Mo Run would be the teacher and the Shizun, right? Like that kind of thing. She steered away from that while still being able to deliver everything that usually comes with that. And all for the better, because it allows for all of this exploration and really interesting character stuff to come up versus a more, I don't want to say stereotypical because the connotation is kind of bad. A more, I guess, archetypal representation of their situation. I do really appreciate that. I've got to stop drinking when I talk to you guys. Jesus Christ. Liv is like, Chu Wan-ning has never underperformed in his life. So he goes for the biggest dick in the cultivation world first. And I respect that. Oh. I mean, hard agree. And even that aspect of his character is being explored with all of this. His perfectionism and high drive for excelling at everything he puts his mind to, for being so obscenely competent. You love to see that come into play as well. Liv, I'm gonna do it to you again, Liv. And it's your own fault, just so you know. So, we're coming up on time to hop over to, what are we doing? Chapters 199 through 202 today, I believe. Was there anything else really quickly? We've set out on a new arc. We've set out on a new adventure for Mount Huang. And I feel like there was something else that I wanted to mention, but maybe I'm just lying. Maybe I'm just a liar. We're having Shu Shuanglin developments. Maybe there wasn't. Maybe we covered all of the big things for a change. I always feel like there's something I miss or accidentally leave out. Oh, Maria says, I remember volume 1 when she was like, is this story about Mo Run learning how to bottom? And I was like, imagine thinking Chuaning would ever top. Yeah, it was, because that was another, at least going by just as a comparison to Moto Zushe, which I hope isn't annoying for you, but that's kind of what I usually reach for in my comparisons. But yeah, just going off of, it's usually the stoic one who winds up giving more top energy, not just in Moto Zusha, but that's the easiest one to pull for, right? And it's usually the disaster bisexual who winds up face down. And that's why at the beginning I was like, oh, this seems like it's going to be this. Also, in addition to that, then there's also who's the Shizun and who's the disciple. And I was like, oh, if we're going for that more type of vibe, then maybe this is a story about Mo Run, you know, learning vulnerability in the sense of he's playing at being a top when he wants to be, when he may actually be more predisposed to bottoming and having that playing into his whole character development and everything. That is, I believe, where my mind was going with that. And then she was like, and then Meepo was like, no. Sit down, you basic bitch. That's not what we're doing here. We're doing something even more interesting. And I was like, yes, ma'am. So sorry, ma'am. Okay, we are now coming up on 3 p.m. I am going to hop on over and get the stream going for reading today. I need more tea, and then we will just get started. There's like, I don't remember if I mentioned this before, there's like 27 people in here. That is a personal best for these streams. I think in the previous streams there were like 26, and now there's 27. There's usually around like 15 or something, even after we started the Erha streams and whatnot, and now there's 27. That's a high mark for these streams. And so I just wanted to say hello. Hi, I hope you're enjoying yourself. I hope you're having a blast. This would be kind of an interesting first stream to hop in on, so hopefully this isn't your first one. But if it is, you chose a time to join the party. But thank you so much for being here. I'll see you guys over on the other stream in just a few minutes. Thank you so much for a enlightening discussion, as always. All right, I'll see you in a second.